Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about the lyric poetry of 7th century BCE Greek poet Archilochus. So, considering that Archilochus lived and wrote 2,600 some years ago, we have a remarkable amount of material from him. Because this is one of the things about ancient poetry, right? Ancient writing of any kind, really, but ancient poetry in particular, is this sort of weird thing where fragments of it get preserved, either because we find papyri or whatever it is, some sort of physical remnant of it found in archaeological excavations or what have you, or because other writers quoted very small amounts of that poetry, right? So like Aristotle might quote a line or a phrase from someone like Archilochus, and that would be all we have of that poem, right? So with that in mind, the fact that from 2,600 some years ago, we actually have some fairly complete poems, right? Like, so some of these are fragments of the same poem, right? So to an ex-mistress exists in 1, 2, 3, 4 fragments. Encounter in a meadow consists of 2 surviving fragments, one of which is quite long, right? So it goes, this is 196a all the way down, and there are some missing bits of it, right? So these ellipse points indicate missing information within a line. These larger sets of dots indicate some missing lines. So there's, the fragments are fragmentary, right? But then we get continued all the way through to 3/4 of the way through this page. That's a huge fragment, right? Especially since some of them, so like, some of the fragments in this collection, Greek lyric poetry, translated and edited by M.L. West, some of them are very, very short, right? Like portions of lines. So let me grab one here. So like here's one, fragment 117, sing muse of the coiffure Glaucus. That's all we have of that poem. What else was in it? What else happened? No clue, as far as I'm aware. Here's another one, fragment 127. So I did wrong. I dare say others have been caught the same. Cool. Short. Yeah. Fragment 213. With their lives in the arms of the waves. Not even an entire thought presented in that fragment, right? But it's a piece that we have. So the fact that we do have these very, very long fragments is really remarkable. Now, Archilochus writes in a couple of different forms, poetic forms. One is the epode. And basically the epode, at this point in poetic history, refers to a poetic form in which there is a long first line followed by 1 or 2 short lines, right? So fragment 172 is an example of this. Papa Lycambes, what do you mean by this? Who has unhinged your wits? That used to be so sound, now you turn out the big laugh of the town, right? So the first line, Papa Lycambes, what do you mean by this? Fairly lengthy. Who has unhinged your wits is much shorter. It's about maybe 2/3 the length on the page here, right? I'm assessing that. It's hard to assess this exactly when I'm working from an English language translation. But so this is one style, right? This is one form of poetry in which you have a long line setup and then a short line continuation or reversal, right? So that's one approach that he uses. Another is what's called the iamb. And today, for English language speakers, particularly anyone who's taken British Literature 1 at university, the first connection we're likely to make with the term iamb is iambic pentameter, which is the meter in which Shakespeare and his contemporaries largely wrote. And they wrote this way because in English, 5 metrical feet per line in an unstressed, stressed pattern is the most natural way of representing English speech. That's not precisely what the Greeks of, I think he was from the island of Pharos, if I remember correctly. It's not precisely what 7th century Aegean Greeks meant by it. There seems to be some indication that iambic meter was used, that is 5 metrical feet, an unstressed, stressed pattern, not necessarily iambic pentameter, which is the 5 metrical feet, but that unstressed, stressed pattern of syllables. But iambs were much more this sort of carnivalesque and grotesque genre, a kind of satire slash, grotesque is the right word, right? Because it's often very sexually explicit, scatological. There's an element of bragging to much of it because they're often about, I've slept with all of these women, or I've done these sort of crazy sexual feats, etc., etc. So it's much more like this, right? So in this text, we have a section called erotic fragments. And this first one that's included, fragment 23, is, again, a more extended one that I don't 100% know what to make of it. It sounds like it is about bisexuality, but I'm also not 100% sure of that because I'm not sure who the speaker of the poem is supposed to be, because we have this first portion. I replied, "Madam, you mustn't be at all afraid of ill repute, as for..." And then we have something missing. The way that it's set up with just a set of ellipse points in the line itself suggests that this is something missing just from this line rather than a missing set of lines. And so to the extent that this is addressing a woman, presumably more or less with Archilochus as the poet persona, although I can't say that for sure. The rest of the fragment seems to suggest bisexuality, right? Because this opening, "Madam, you mustn't be at all afraid of ill repute," suggests that this is a seduction. But then we go on. "As for..." Missing piece, "I'll deal with it. Don't you be angry with me. You really think I'm such a wretch as that? You must have seen me as a low-class churl, not what I am and what my forebears were. I know the art of loving him that loves me, hating my hater and foul-mouthing him with an ant's venom. So I'm quite sincere. This citadel that you are walking in was never sacked by any man, but now your spear has conquered it. Yours is the glory, so be its queen, enjoy dominion. I dare say quite a few will envy you." So, it's not clearly about bisexuality necessarily, but there's obviously this sort of martial metaphor here, this martial analogy that sexuality is like conquest. But it's striking that it's no man has conquered it with his spear. The poet persona seems to be trying to seduce this woman, who's not a man and presumably doesn't have a spear, if you know what I'm saying. And so it seems very much like a strange thing, right? No guy has fucked me. You will be the first to have sex with me. So won't everyone be jealous? That's a weird flex for a stridently heterosexual guy. I will throw that out there, right? Like, no shade if Archilochus is bi. Cool, I approve. But it's like, if this is, hey, I've got game with the ladies, and you can tell because no guy has had sex with me, that's a strange approach, in my view. Even the idea of, like, I'm a virgin, I haven't had sex with another woman, cool. Like, that would make sense to me. But it's a strange setup, in my view, and I think it's interesting. And again, I don't know precisely what to make of it for that reason. But we got a whole bunch of more erotic fragments that are much more graphic. If this were a monetized YouTube channel and I was trying to make any money off of this, I probably would not read these because, yeah. But this sort of idea, right, that we often have this conception, I think, that ancient peoples were very sort of proper, right, that they behaved according to good, proper Christian values, right, and of course they weren't, right. Christianity didn't exist. The Aegean Islands, where Archilochus was from, likely did not have much contact with Jewish civilizations or cultures in the Levant region. They may have encountered some of them, but probably not a lot, right? So they didn't have this conception. But these are very, very graphic. And again, it sort of undercuts this conceptualization that we often have, which I think is really much more sort of rooted in the self-styling of the Victorians than an actual understanding of history and different cultures. So these are additional erotic fragments that are very erotic, again, right? And many of them are just small phrases, right? So 247, his tender horn. I mean, that's not the most graphic we'll get to, but trust me, we're getting there. Fragment 40, wet mound of Venus. Fragment 41, up and down she bounced like a kingfisher flapping on a jutting rock. 42, like a Thracian or Phrygian drinking beer through a tube, she sucked, stooped down, engaged two from behind. Fragment 43, and his dong flooded over like a Praenaean stall-fed donkeys. Fragment 44, foam all around her mouth. Fragment 45, they stooped and spurted off all their accumulated wantonness. So yeah, crazy world, crazy times, right? This is again, this very graphic style of poetry. And in some ways, it almost strikes me as a kind of precursor to comedy, particularly what's called old comedy, the comedy of someone like Aristophanes. But this also, there are elements of this that continue through. And like, it's famously been said of Shakespeare that there are far more fart jokes in Shakespeare than the average person on the street is aware of, right? So these sort of scatological and sexual elements to this comic poetry, right? This becomes foundational to the genre of comedy as such, as it sort of continues and develops into a theatrical form alongside other forms of comic poetry and things like this. But one of the problems that comes with this is that often problematic from today's perspective, right? From the perspective of contemporary gender politics, sexuality politics, etc., these iambs, these comic poems, are often really, really bad. So I'm gonna read you two examples of these extended fragments or multiple fragments from the same poem. And you'll get a sense of this, right? These are both rooted in misogyny. The first one, to an ex-mistress, is very much about sort of mocking the former beloved for aging, and then Encounter in a Meadow deals essentially with sexual coercion, if not outright rape. It is at the very least a sexual encounter to which the beloved does not really consent. So, I mean, it is rape in that sense. Whether it's like, whether it's like the sort of image of violent rape that many people conjure up when they hear the word rape is a slightly different question, or whether this is closer to something like date rape, which again is rape, right? Like let's be clear about that. Let's be upfront about that. So it is a rape poem, which is pretty fucked up. But again, this is part of this whole genre of like sexuality, scatological humor, and these very problematic gender conceptions, right? So this is To an Ex-Mistress. And again, we've got multiple fragments here. Your tender skin has lost its former bloom, dries out in furrows, ugly age makes you its prey. Sweet charm from your fair face has hopped it, after all the winds of many winters have assaulted you, and many a time, missing text, and many a sightless eel have you taken in, missing text, and I used to explore your rugged glens in my full-blooded youth, missing text. Such was the lust for sex that, worming in under my heart, quite blinded me and robbed me of my young wits. So, what we're getting here is these very, unfortunately, traditional negative depictions of women, especially of women who enter even early middle age, right? Like back in the day, you hit your early 20s, and in a world where you were sort of expected, if you were a woman, to be married and having kids by mid-adolescence, you were now quite old and you were no longer as desirable in a very fucked up way. But we have this sort of recurring comic through line where a male speaker, whether this is in poetry or theatrical comedy or whatever it is, will sort of mock the hideousness of an old woman and belittle her in this way, right? And this, of course, has major negative impact on women's psychology, self-esteem, et cetera, et cetera. And it is one of the things that continues to drive the modern beauty industry, right? That promise of, oh, you can look young and beautiful, because if you don't look young and beautiful, then you are without value, right? These incredibly problematic ways of looking at the world that do substantial psychological damage to the people that these discourses target. And then in Encounter in the Meadow, we have a more direct violation, right? It is not dependent on the negative self-image of the beloved. It is direct abandonment of any idea of consent, right? And then again, this is quite a long fragment, which is unusual for ancient works. So this is Encounter in a Meadow. No, my dear friend, I'm overcome by crippling desire. Missing text. Holding entirely off. Missing line. If you can't wait and your desire is urgent, there's somebody else at our house now longing for a man. A lovely, slender girl. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong if I'm any judge with her looks. Why not make friends with her? That's what she said, and here's how I replied. Daughter of Amphimedo, that lady fine and true, whom now the moldy earth has taken in, The love goddess offers young men a range of joys besides the sacrament, and one of them will serve. We'll talk of all this, you and I, at leisure when, missing text, grows dark, and may God be our aid. I'll do it all just as you say, missing text. But please, my dear, don't grudge it if I go under the arch through the gates. I'll dock at the grass borders, be sure of that. Now as for Neobule, someone else have her. Dear me, she's past ripe, twice your age. Her girlhood's flower has shed its petals, lost all the enchantment it had. She's never got enough. She's proved her... missing texts. Measure, crazy woman, keep her away for the crows. I pray no friend of mine would have me marry somebody like her and give all the neighbors a laugh. No, you're the one I want. You're not untrustworthy, you're not two-faced, but she's so precipitate, she makes friends with crowds of men. I don't want babies blind and premature like the proverbial bitch from showing too much haste. That's what I said, and then I took the girl, and laying her down in the flowers with my soft textured cloak, I covered her, my arm cradled her neck, while she, in her fear like a fawn, gave up the attempt to run. Gently I touched her breasts, where the young flesh peeped from the edge of her dress, her ripeness newly come, and then, caressing all her lovely form, I shot my hot energy off, just brushing golden hairs. So yeah, it's a rape poem. And again, this is tied to this discourse of women aging, because Neobule is dismissed for being too old, and she seems to be I think she's sort of a recurring figure in Archilochus's poetry. But this sort of idea of, like, I am only sexually interested in someone who's young and beautiful and fertile, and I am going to have sex with you whether you want me to or not. Incredibly problematic. But again, this fits within this sort of genre of sexuality in poetry, sexual activity, vice, etc., that is part of this larger stylistic category of the grotesque, very problematically so.